They said she was mad. They said the alien widow had lost her mind after her mate vanished in the dark storms of Virexa 10 years ago, and since then she lived alone by the cliffs where the wind never stopped screaming and the stars felt too close. For comfort, her name was Nira, and she was not like the others, her eyes too deep, her skin a shade darker than the usual Virexan hue, and her voice always low as if afraid someone or something might hear and answer back. The new human engineer Ely had heard the stories on his first day in the colony. They told him in whispers during lunch breaks and long nights by the fading power lights that she once tried to warn the council of a danger coming from the skies, but no one listened, not even her own kind. They said she walked the cliffs at night and spoke to shadows that were not there. They laughed and said she waited for her dead mate to return, but dead don't come back, not here, not on this cursed planet. Ely did not believe in ghosts. Tales he was sent here to fix broken cum lines and reboot dead satellites. But curiosity is a strange thing, and when he first saw her standing near the black edge of the cliffs, eyes closed, arms lifted to the sky, as if she could hold it in her hands, something inside him paused and listened. She looked at him without blinking as he passed by her on the hill trail, her voice soft yet firm as stone. "It's waking up again," she said. Eli blinked and looked behind him, but no one else was there. "What's waking up?" he asked. She didn't reply, just stared at the clouds swirling above the western ridge and whispered something he could not understand that night. Eli couldn't sleep. Something kept buzzing inside. His walls, like the cum wires, were alive. The sound wasn't loud but sharp, like a code he couldn't break, and outside the wind howled louder than usual, shaking the metal walls of his unit. In the morning the colony was quieter than normal. One of the crew, named Rel, had vanished during night duty. No trace, no signal, no alarm. Just gone. His tracking badge found near the edge of the energy fence, torn in two like soft cloth. People looked afraid but said nothing, just worked faster and avoided eye contact. Eli noticed that the security cams near the cliffs had gone dark, and no one seemed eager to repair them. At noon, Nira came again. This time, she waited near his repair pod, her hands hidden under her long gray cloak and her face unreadable. "You heard it, didn't you?" she said. Eli felt a chill on his spine. He nodded slowly, not sure why. "They think it's just static or weather, but it's not," she continued, her voice barely above the wind. "It sings to those who can hear, and it always sings before it feeds." Eli frowned and checked his scanner. Nothing unusual, just low signals and weather pings. But she stepped closer and handed him a small crystal, black and glowing faint blue in its core. "Put this on your cum panel tonight and listen. With no filters, no blockers, let it speak." Before he could ask more, she was gone, like the wind had swallowed her steps, and only the crystal remained in his hand, warm and pulsing like a tiny heartbeat. That night he did as she said. He connected the crystal to his cum panel and removed the safety filters. The sound that came through was not static, it was like a voice, buried deep in metal, screaming and singing at once, a strange melody that didn't match any pattern from known channels. His screen blinked with symbols. He couldn't read, symbols that felt old, ancient, even, and then the voice changed into something clear. "Help me." Eli jumped back. His chair hit the floor, and the screen went black. Outside, the power lines blinked 3 times, and then everything was quiet, too quiet for a windy planet. Next morning, he found Nira already waiting near the fuel yard. She looked tired, her eyes red, like she hadn't slept. "You heard it?" she said. He nodded slowly. "You believed me, didn't you?" Eli didn't answer at first, then said, "What is it? What's calling?" Nira stepped closer and whispered like a prayer, "They took my mate. They come from the dark between stars, and they feed on minds that don't fight back." Eli felt his throat dry and his heart beat louder. "Why me? Why now?" She looked at him, not with fear, but with something worse. "Because you listened, and now they know you can hear." The wind howled again, louder than before, and somewhere above the clouds a shadow passed slowly, like something vast and waiting. Eli sat in his room with the black crystal on the desk, its soft blue glow still pulsing like a sleeping heart, and the memory of the voice from last night, still echoing in his mind, not loud but deep, like something forgotten calling from the bottom of a sea of silence. Wanted to tell someone, but who would believe him when they already thought Nira was mad, and now he was the one carrying her crystal and listening to her whispers. He took the crystal again and plugged it into his panel this time. He set the system to record everything and watched as the wave patterns danced across the screen in no rhythm. Known to human science not like weather signals or machine pulses, this was alive. Voice came again, not words this time, but tones long and low like a chant from a forgotten temple, and between them flickers of other voices as if many were trapped inside the same cry, trying to break through together. Eli saved the file and called the main control room, asking to speak with the comms supervisor, an old man named Brask who never smiled and hated wasting time. When Brask arrived, Eli played him. The recording stood quietly waiting for a reaction, but Brask only squinted at the screen, leaned in, and shook his head slowly. It's interference, he said. Could be storm residue or low orbit dust bouncing off the satellite dish. Eli pointed at the signal pattern, said it wasn't natural, that it repeated like a code. But Brask waved him off and told him to focus on the repairs. Not fairy tales. Later that evening, Eli went to the mess hall, but the others were quiet. They avoided his eyes. Whispered to each other. He could hear his name and the word Nira spoken like a warning. Returned to his room, locked the door, and opened his personal log. He played the signal again, and this time, he listened with eyes closed, breathing, slow heart steady, trying to feel, not here. That's when it changed again. The voice became one singular and broken. They buried me in sky, it said. Tell her I remember. He opened his eyes fast and felt cold sweat down his back. No one else had touched the recording. No one had changed. I'd copied the message to a portable chip and left the room. The air outside was thick with clouds and static. Buzz danced across the colony, lights like insects made of electricity. He went to find Nira, not at the pond cliffs this time, but deep inside the old part of the colony, where no one went anymore, where metal rusted and the floors creaked and the wind never touched. He found her sitting near a broken power core, her eyes closed, her hands resting on her knees. Like she had been waiting for him, not for minutes but years. Eli showed her the chip and played the message. Her eyes opened wide and wet with something close to sorrow. Maybe fear, maybe love, maybe both. She touched the speaker and whispered his name. The name of her mate, not in Varexan but in human tongue. Torin. Eli froze. He had heard that name before in old crew logs. Torin was part of the first team to explore the upper sky towers, before they were sealed off after the storm. Nira stood and took his hand, pulling him down through a hatch beneath the rusted floor, a place Eli never knew existed, filled with dust and old tech, humming faintly with forgotten energy. There was a terminal there covered in moss and age, and when she turned it on, the screen blinked slowly and showed files locked under admin clearance. Eli used his engineer pass, low-level access, not enough to open all, but enough to read the folder names. Subject Torin 56, Mind Resonance Trial, Varexa Signal. Drift Test Logs. He looked at Nira, confused and afraid, and she told him in a quiet voice that the colony had used her mate in an experiment to speak with the void, to reach the deep stars and bring knowledge back, but something answered that should not have. She said Torin had not died, but had changed, become something else, trapped between here and there, no longer just flesh but signal and memory and pain. Eli backed away, not because he didn't believe her, but because he did, because the message made sense now, and the voice was not warning, it was remembering, it was crying. Nira gave him a second crystal, duller than the first, and said it carried part of Torin's mind, and he must keep it safe because others would try to take it, erase it. Forget I'd asked why him, and she looked into his eyes and said, because you listened. And in that silence, Eli understood he was already part of the story, already marked by the voice, already chosen by whatever lived between the stars and spoke. In broken code outside, the ground trembled, not hard, but enough to feel alive, and far above the clouds opened for a moment, just long enough for something massive and dark to blink and vanish again. The morning came late as if the sun forgot its path, and the sky hung low like a curtain hiding something behind it. And Eli woke with a heavy chest, the crystal beside him, glowing faint like it had been dreaming. Too, he checked the colony board and saw a new alert posted in red, not loud but sharp. Technician Bren missing last night near Zone 5 perimeter. No other details, no rescue alert, no response team formed, only a quiet line of text and a request to stay away from the energy fields. Near the southern fence. This was the third one in 5 days. First, Relva and Sana now. Bren all vanished near places where the air itself buzzed without sound, where the scanner blinked wrong and the temperature dropped. Without reason, Eli asked Brask again about it, asked why no one was reacting, why people were disappearing, and all the commander said was that Virexa had always taken its toll, and the planet was never meant to be soft. But Eli saw the fear in his eyes, saw the way his hand trembled when holding the report, saw how he avoided the map with red zones marked not as danger, but as silence. He left the office with the second crystal in his pocket, the one Nira had given him, said it held a piece of Torin's mind or soul or memory. Maybe all and maybe more. Nira was not at the cliffs, not near the power core, not in the old tunnels. It felt like she had faded too, like the air was swallowing everyone who knew too. Much. Eli walked to Zone 5 alone, tools in his bag but not for repair. Not today. His scanner open and eyes fixed on the grass that shimmered like water when the wind passed over it. Reached the energy fence and saw nothing wrong, no broken parts, no marks. But his scanner blinked red, then green, then blank like it couldn't decide what was real. He stepped closer and the air grew colder, not freezing, but thin like breathing through cloth, and his hair lifted with static. His ears ringing softly like a whisper, trying to form words. He turned on the recording device and held the second crystal tight. It pulsed once, then again. And then the scanner caught something strange, not a heat signal, not motion, but displacement, like something was there but not fully there. Eli marked the coordinates and moved around the area, slow, careful, each step like walking through dreams that were not his. And then he saw a small circle on the ground, not drawn but grown, the grass bent in perfect shape, and inside the circle was dust not from this world. He kneeled, touched the edge, his glove crackled, and the crystal in his hand flared bright, and the voice came again, louder than before. Help us, trapped in the shift, not dead. Eli fell back, heart racing, mind burning with images, not his men, and women floating, eyes open, mouths screaming, no sound, only light and static, and a dark shape above them, wings wide, teeth like glass. He turned off the device and ran back, but the wind had changed now, faster, sharper, like it was chasing, and when he reached the gate, the guard there looked pale and asked where he had been. Eli Lead said nothing much, just checking the cables, and went back to his unit where he locked the door and played the recording again, frame by frame, and found one still image. In the flash it showed Bren not missing, but stretched like light pulled too far, his face frozen, not in fear, but in realization. Behind him a black arc, shaped like a gate, like a wound in space. That night Eli heard a knock, not loud, just 3 soft taps, and when he opened the door, Nira was there, eyes wide, cloak wet from mist and hands shaking. She said the vanishing points were not death sites, but doorways, and the field was thinning. Now the barrier between now and then, between here and what waits, was cracking. Eli asked where the people had gone, and she said they were still here, but not in the way humans understand, trapped between frequencies. Like a voice you cannot tune, just white noise with souls inside. She placed a third crystal on his desk, darker than the others, and said he would need it soon, that the Watchers were getting close, and once they noticed him, they would not forget. He asked who the Watchers were, and she said only the ones who never sleep. The lights blinked, then darkened for 5 seconds, not more, but in those 5 seconds, Eli heard breathing, not outside but inside the walls, like something vast, moving slow, pressing its weight through layers of time. He stayed awake till morning, eyes on the door hand, on the crystal, and ears open for the whisper that might not be real, but could not be ignored. Outside the sun finally rose, but the sky remained gray, as If the planet no longer trusted the light asterisk, the morning felt slower than before, as if time itself was hesitating, unsure whether to move forward or collapse backward, and Ale sat by the edge of his bed with the third crystal still in his hand, its surface now showing thin cracks, glowing like veins of frozen fire, and the weight of silence pressed against the metal walls like breath held too long. Nira had vanished again without a word, and her cloak left near the water tanks folded with care as if she planned to return, but knew she might not, and Eli touched the cloth gently as if it might still carry her warmth or voice or warning. He knew now that the colony was hiding more than disappearances, more than energy readings and unstable fields. It was hiding memory, buried beneath rules and systems coded and sealed where only shadows walked. He opened the main console in the engineering bay early before the others arrived and used the access codes he had found written behind an old monitor, dusty and nearly faded, forgotten by someone who once trusted paper more than machines. The system blinked slow with hesitation, as if it remembered being touched by Forbidden's hands, and inside the secure drive, he found a folder named only with numbers, not words, a cold chain of digits that pulsed when clicked. It opened to video logs, dark and shaky and filled with quiet breathing and whispers in languages half human, half unknown, and Eli felt the air shift behind him as he watched. One log showed Torin standing inside a chamber, not large, not small, just empty and glowing with a light that came from the floor, his face calm, his voice steady as he spoke into the recorder. "We made contact not with them, but with what they touched. It sees us now, it's learning to look." Another log flickered with static, then cleared to show a white room filled with people sleeping on tables, wires in their heads, and above them a shape moved, not solid, not smoke, but something between. In the camera, Shuka's scream started, not loud, not sharp, just broken like glass underwater. Eli's breath grew shallow, his hands shaking as he clicked deeper, finding logs from Project Vault, a memory experiment where human thought was sent outward, not stored in machines, but pushed through signal tunnels, meant to carry data through deep space, faster than light. But something had answered, not with code, not with voice, but with hunger, and now it lived inside those signals, watching, waiting, growing. The last log was labeled Nira, and Eli hesitated before opening it, but the crystal in his hand pulsed as if urging him forward, and the file opened to show her younger eyes. Clearer voice, louder. She was not mad, then she was bright and sharp and afraid. She spoke to the camera. "I warned them. Torin said we must stop, but they wanted more. They thought they were gods, and now we are the ghosts inside this system, trapped with what we called." Eli closed the file and copied all data to a clean drive, which he hid inside his boot wrapped in cloth, then left the bay quietly, just as two officers entered, whispering about another blackout near Zone 7. He walked past them unnoticed or ignored, and felt the floor thrum with a low rhythm like the heartbeat of something buried beneath metal and lies. And when he reached the edge of the colony where the old structures leaned with age, he heard it again, a low voice, not outside, not inside, but everywhere, calling his name, not loud but clear. "Eli." He turned, but no one was there, only dust and cables and wind. But the voice echoed again, "You opened the vault, now see what sleeps." He ran to the cliffs where the storm always gathered and shouted for Nira, but the sky answered instead with a flicker of light, shaped like a gate, and through it for just one breath he saw Torin, his face stretched with light, eyes full of stars, and mouth trying to speak, but the wind swallowed the words. Eli fell to his knees, heart pounding, mind spinning, the crystal in his hand, now hot and alive and whispering 1,000 voices in one, all saying the same word, "Remember." When he returned to the colony, the guards stopped him, asked questions. He could not answer, said he looked sick, said his eyes were wrong, but let him go when he stayed silent, because silence was safer than truth. That night the lights failed in 5 zones at once, and the central core sent out an emergency ping, not for help but for isolation, and Ale knew they would start locking things soon, files, people, memories. He lay on his bed with the 3 crystals beside him, their light weaving together like a map or a signal or a warning, and outside, The wind screamed not like weather, but like something trying to tear through. A wall not built for keeping things out, but for trapping things in. The night felt different, heavier than before, and Eli could not sleep, not because of fear, but because the silence had changed it, no longer waited. Outside like a cold breath, it now sat beside him like a second heart beating in time with his own. And the three crystals glowed together, as if they finally remembered something. When he opened his eyes near dawn, the walls of his room were pulsing not with light, but with vibrations soft and rhythmic, like the hum of voices buried deep under stone. And he knew that the time had come to see what Nira meant when she said they were not dead. He stepped out into the gray mist that covered the colony, like a blanket hiding things that did not wish to be seen, and made his way toward the edge of the cliffs where the ancient tunnels ran beneath the surface tunnels. The maps never showed, and the people pretended were nothing but broken Mias Nira was waiting, her cloak darker, now almost part of the fog, her hands holding a fourth crystal, this one almost black with veins of red light inside it, moving like smoke trapped in ice, and her voice was low but sure as she spoke. "This is the door, and you must carry it because it will not open for me again." She placed the crystal in his hand and guided him through the ruins, the old metallic arches covered in moss and dust, and the deeper they went, the colder it became, not like weather, but like memory, thick and layered and full of whispers that never left. They reached a chamber with a circular wall and no visible entry, no panel, no door, only smooth black surface that hummed when he approached, and the crystal pulsed once hard, then turned silent, and the wall began to shift, not open, but dissolve like smoke pulled apart by unseen fingers. Behind the wall was not a room, but a vast hollow like the inside of a sleeping machine, and suspended from the ceiling by wires and light were shapes not fully human, not fully alien, wrapped in layers of translucent skin, their faces still and eyes closed, but their chests rising and falling slowly. Eli stepped forward, heart caught between terror and wonder, as he saw that each of the floating forms had something in their hands, something small and glowing. And then he saw Torin again. Not a memory, not a recording, but the real body, wrapped in light skin, eyes shut, but brow tense like in the middle of a thought never finished. Nira stepped beside him and whispered, "They are not dead. They were taken between time, frozen in the signal, their minds separated from bodies and trapped in loop by the machine, the one the colony built without knowing what it truly touched." Eli reached out and touched the surface of the nearest chamber, and his vision blurred as hundreds of images flooded him, men and women speaking to shadows, machines melting into light, voices turning to dust, stars pulsing like eyes watching everything. Fell back and gasped, and the crystal dropped from his hand, but before it could hit the ground, it floated slowly and hovered above the floor, spinning fast, then slow, then fast again, and from its glow a figure appeared, not solid, not ghost, but something in between, and it spoke in Torin's voice, broken but real. "We are here, we remember. We scream, but the world cannot hear through the static." Eli felt his throat tighten as if the air itself refused to let him speak, and Nira placed her hand on his shoulder and said, "They are waiting for release, but if done wrong, they will not return as who they were, but as what the signal shaped them into." He asked what shaped meant, and she looked at the floating bodies and said, "The machine did not just record them, it listened to them, and when it ran out of human code, it wrote its own." Eli turned and looked at the walls covered in ancient carvings, not human, not Varexan, something older, and he realized this place was not built by the colony. It had been here long before, waiting for someone to activate it. Again the air grew louder, though nothing moved, and from far above the ceiling crackled with electric noise, and one of the floating chambers began to shake, not violently, but like something waking from a long and painful dream. Nira's voice trembled as she said, "We have little time. The Watchers will feel the signal shift, and they will come. They always do when the loop is broken." Eli stepped toward the shaking pod and raised the crystal again, but this time it resisted his hand, pulling toward the chamber on its own, as if it had chosen, and the voice from inside whispered, "I remember the stars, I remember her. Do not let me forget again." As the walls vibrated and dust fell like snow, Eli knew that the people trapped inside were not gone, only waiting. Caught between thought and light, and only one question remained. If they returned, would they still be human or something entirely new? The air no longer moved like wind, it moved like breath, slow and watching and thick with something unseen, and Eli stood in the vault chamber with the black crystal now resting in his hand, not warm, not cold, but pulsing like a heartbeat that did not belong to him. And behind him, the voices had stopped, not because they were gone, but because they were listening. Nira stepped toward the floating chamber that had begun to shake, the one holding the figure that used to be Torin, or still was. Torin, or maybe both, and she whispered to the glass in a language that was not spoken with the mouth, but with memory, and something inside answered with a ripple across the walls like light caught in water. Pot opened, not like a door, but like a flower, and the being inside lowered gently onto the floor. His eyes still closed, his skin marked with faint lines like code carved into flesh, and for a moment, the silence grew thicker, as if the world itself waited to see what he would become when he woke. Eli stepped back, unsure if what he felt was awe or fear, or both, and his fingers tightened around the crystal, which now glowed brighter than ever, and the red veins inside it had begun to swirl faster and faster like a storm. Inside glass, the moment Torin's eyes opened, the chamber shook with a deep hum, not mechanical, not natural, but ancient, like a sound the planet had not heard in 1,000 years, and his gaze fixed on Nira, first soft and full of something like sorrow, then on Eli, sharp and endless, and suddenly Eli saw the stars, not the ones above, but the ones between the cracks of time. Torin did not speak with his mouth, but his voice filled the room like thunder under skin. You broke the cycle, you gave me shape again, but others are waking, not like me, not bound to memory, not shaped by love. Nira looked down as if she already knew, and Eli felt his bones vibrate with the weight of truth not told, and the crystal in his hand grew heavier, as if it too feared what was coming above them. The ceiling groaned with pressure, and dust fell like ash, and the chamber lights flickered, as if struggling to stay awake, and Nira turned to Eli and said, "The truth wakes now, and truth has enemies." They helped Torin stand, though his body moved without effort, as if remembering gravity, not learning it. And together they moved through the tunnels back toward the surface, and as they climbed, the air behind them shifted and turned cold, like something old had opened its eyes. When they reached the cliff edge again, the sky was red, not from sun, not from storm, but from something rising slowly behind the clouds, something that stretched wide like wings, made of smoke and light, and the wind carried whispers in 100 voices, none of them kind. The colony below was in panic, alerts flashing, guards running, people shouting without direction, and from the sky beams of black light fell silent and straight, hitting the outer towers, which vanished without sound, only light, then nothing. Eli ran toward the comms tower, dragging the data drive from the vault, and the crystal still pulsing in his hand, and inside, he tried to connect to the network, tried to send a warning to Earth, to anyone, to something that could listen, but the signal was blocked from inside. Torin touched the console, and it lit up instantly, systems opening, paths unlocking, and the screen filled with unknown symbols that shifted into words. They are here to reclaim what we touched, we called them without knowing they heard, and now they arrive not as guests but as reminders. Outside, the sky darkened, and a shape passed over the colony, large enough to cover buildings, silent as thought and heavy as regret. And the Watchers finally came, not in ships, not in bodies, but in forms that bent light and voice and time. Eli saw them for only a second, shadows, with faces like masks and limbs like smoke, walking without steps, looking at everything as if judging, not with anger, but with disappointment. And people began to fall, not wounded, not dead, but vanished like they had been erased from memory itself. Torin stood before them, raised his hand, and spoke in the voice that had crossed the stars, and the Watchers paused, not long, but enough to mark him as one of theirs, or one who had touched their shape and spared him for now. Nira took Eli's hand and pulled him back toward the tunnels as the colony began to collapse, not from fire or war, but from forgetting, as if the land itself had grown tired of holding lies and was letting go. Piece by piece, as they escaped into the mountain path, the last thing Ailey saw was the central tower folding in on itself quietly, without resistance, like a page being turned in a book, written by someone else inside. The tunnels again with only torches and breath, and the faint glow of the fourth crystal. Eli asked what the Watchers truly were, and Torin answered not with fear, but with sadness. They are not evil, they are memory made alive. They came to correct what we broke, and now they wait for the choice we must make. The tunnels felt alive, not with fear, but with waiting, as if the walls themselves were listening. And Eli walked behind Torin and Nira, the fourth crystal warm in his hand, the other three hidden in his coat, humming together like voices trying to become one. And the deeper they went, the clearer it became that this place was never meant to be found by human hands above them. The colony was gone, not destroyed, but forgotten, wiped clean like chalk from stone, and those who remained would not remember what was lost, not the names, not the people, not the voices screaming as they vanished into light, only silence and stories that would never be told. Again Torin moved slowly, his steps light, as if he carried no weight, but Eli could feel the pressure around him growing tighter, like the tunnel itself was narrowing, though the path remained wide. And Nira said nothing now, her face calm, but her eyes holding something heavy, like sorrow mixed with fire. They reached the heart of the mountain, a place carved not by tools, but by memory, shaped by things that lived before time was counted. And in the center stood a pillar made of crystal, taller than any man, glowing with the same light as the ones Eli carried, and around it symbols floated in the air like letters trying to write themselves back into a forgotten sentence. Torin stopped and looked back, and his voice came not from his mouth but from everywhere. This is the core. This is where they first spoke to us, where we answered without knowing what, listened, and where the signal was born. Eli stepped forward, feeling the crystals pull toward the pillar, and as he raised his hand, the fourth one lifted on its own and drifted toward the structure, and the others followed, glowing brighter now, as if they recognized home. The pillar pulsed once and then again, and the room began to shift, not physically, but in perception, the air heavier, the light slower, the sound softer, and the pillar spoke not with sound, but with thought. And Eli heard it clear inside his chest. Choose. He looked at Nira, who nodded without words, and at Torin, who did not nod but watched silently, waiting not for hope, not for peace, but for truth. Voice continued. One path preserves silence, keeps the Watchers asleep, holds the memory locked deep. No war, no noise, no truth. The other wakes the mind, breaks the cage, frees the signal, opens the gate, reveals all. Ailey felt the choice burning in his bones, and he thought of the people lost, the colony erased, the sky filled with shadows that did not kill but removed. And he knew this choice was not only his, but still only he could make it. His hand hovered between 2 points on the pillar, one pulsing blue, the other red, and the room around him shimmered with futures that had not happened and might never happen, and the crystals in his coat began to spin, slowly, like waiting for his heartbeat to guide them. He touched the red. The mountain shook, not with violence, but with recognition, and the pillar split into light, each crystal shattering into a billion threads that wrapped around the walls, filling the air with sound that had not been heard since the beginning of time. And above them, the sky cracked open with light. Eli fell to his knees as the memories poured through him, not only his, but everyone's, the erased, the forgotten, the broken, the silenced. He saw Torin in the chamber, screaming not in fear but in understanding, saw Nira waiting by the cliffs year after year, holding onto a voice only she could hear. He saw the Watchers, not angry, not cruel, but full of law and memory, their faces not cold, but still and endless, like oceans that had watched stars die in worlds born, and now they looked again, not at the colony, but at Eli, and one of them spoke. You have chosen truth. The mountain split at the top, light pouring into the sky in a spiral that touched the stars, and far above, something began to shift, not fast, but forever, and the stars blinked. Once, as if nodding, Eli stood, not broken, not whole, changed and glowing with what had passed through him, and beside him, Nira smiled for the first time, not in joy but in peace, and Torin placed his hand on the pillar, now quiet, and whispered, "Then, let them remember. The colony was rebuilt not by machines, but by memory, and those who returned came not as they were, but as who they had forgotten they could be." And though not all came back, some voices were heard again in the wind and the stone. In the light, Ely stayed not as engineer, not as messenger, but as witness, and when others came from Earth years later and asked what happened, he only pointed to the sky and said, "We remembered, and somewhere above, beyond even the watchers, they." Stars listened quietly, like old friends who finally heard the story told right.